Hello and welcome to Ultraviolet Network's Intro to FortiGate Series Module 3.5 Setup Decisions Part 2. I'm your host, Matt Sharif. In the previous module, we discussed Operation Mode, which consisted of NAT mode and transparent mode, and as well as whether or not we wanted to do SD-WAN. In this video, we're going to cover virtual domains, administration, and then basic maintenance. Assumptions for this module is that you have a FortiGate, you've completed Module 2 initial configuration, and with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Virtual domains, or VDOMs. What is a VDOM? A VDOM is a feature that's present in a number of firewalls. Fortinet calls it a VDOM. You may have heard Cisco call it a context. Palo Alto calls it a virtual system. The idea here is the ability to split your firewall up into multiple virtual firewalls. The example we have on the screen here is that we have a production VDOM and a lab VDOM that's providing layer 3 routing and policy, where the web services VDOM is transparent in that it's brokering the connection to the web. Why would you want to use a setup like this? Let's say you have an application that's running behind the production VDOM and you've got its test sister or test equivalent or test copy running behind the lab VDOM. Anything you would want to run in the lab VDOM will ultimately end up in the production VDOM. I know there's a joke that some folks, and a friend of mine, we'll call him Grumpy Cat, says that real men test in production. Yeah, well, I guess I'm not a real man. My point is don't test in production. Everything you could do in a lab VDOM, the rules, testing all the features, and once you're confident in that, you can definitely move it over to the production VDOM. So let's talk a little bit about virtual domain types. There's the split task VDOM and a multi-VDOM mode. So the split task VDOM essentially separates the management and data planes from each other. So if you have an issue that takes out your data plane, it's not a big deal. You can still access the FortiGate and you can continue to manage it. Multi-VDOM is essentially what we're seeing in this picture here. So we have a transparent VDOM up here, a production VDOM down here, and a lab VDOM over there. Use cases for multi-VDOM is if you have multi-tenancy. For instance, you have customer A, or let's say you're running a building network and you're providing basic firewalling to multiple floors. You could set up a VDOM for each floor, for each tenant, that they could either manage themselves or you could manage for them, but which would lead us into the second use case, which is the multiple overlapping subnets policy sets. So let's say customer A and customer B have overlapping sections of like 10.0/8. You would definitely want VDOMs to help isolate those and keep them from interfering with each other. Another use case that's not talked about a lot is internal segmentation. Internal segmentation is a strategy and a security strategy that's come to light a lot more recently, given the number of breaches and attacks we've been hearing about, and it's basically going about segmenting your network to the point where folks only gain access to the resources they need. It goes hand in hand with zero trust, and I'm not going to go too far into what that all means as far as how you should deploy it and all of that. I just want you to understand that internal segmentation has become a very big thing, where firewalls are now replacing your internal core routers and core switches, so that someone who is accessing a server should actually be accessing the server. We're applying identity to these traffic flows, and we're ensuring that these traffic flows are legitimate. And we're also inspecting them to prevent lateral movement. Connections between these VDOMs so that they can talk to each other, similar to how we see in here, is these blue lines are called inter VDOM links. We won't go into depth with VDOMs, as these are generally an advanced use case. I do want you to be aware of the feature availability. Typically, FortiGates by default come with 10 VDOMs, physical FortiGates. Virtual FortiGates depends on the SKU that you purchase. If you buy a subscription SKU, you are only going to get one VDOM, your root VDOM. If you buy a perpetual SKU, there may be one of two options. If your SKU ends with a V, that means it's VDOM less. So it's only one VDOM, and it's generally more affordable. If you have a regular, like say FG VM02, that will include 10 VDOMs. So just be aware of what you're being. So just be aware of what you're purchasing so that you know what to expect. So let's take a quick look at how to enable VDOMs on a FortiGate. So if we go take a look at the FortiGate that we've been working on this series, I'm going to do one step before we go ahead and continue with this. Is I'm going to create an admin revision. So as you can see, I have a pre-stupid idea revision here. I'm gonna do pre-VDOM revision there. These are revisions and snapshots of the configuration that are saved to the disk of the FortiGate. This should not be substituted for a proper backup of the configuration here. So a proper backup of the configuration is you just click backup, and you're going to go ahead and either enable encryption. I do advise you that if you do this, make sure you save this password somewhere safe. TAC cannot decrypt an encrypted config file for you. And then you would click backup to and you local PC, or if you had a disk in the FortiGate, you could back up to the USB disk, and then it'll go ahead and back up the configuration. Do this before you upgrade firmware. Do this before you do anything major. However, I do want to demonstrate config revisions as well as enabling VDOMs. So back to the point of this demo, and that is enabling VDOMs. Back before 6.4, you used to be able to enable VDOMs in the UI. So if you're using 6.2, 6.0, you can still do this, and you'll find it somewhere around either the next generation firewall mode or central SNet, or it'll be down here somewhere. At any rate, as of 6.4 and up, it is not available. So we'll use the CLI. Config system global, set VDOM mode, and if I did question mark, you'd see no VDOM mode, which is the mode we're currently in, and it's the default mode. Split VDOM mode, which is the separation of the data and management planes, and then multi-VDOM, which is each VDOM is its own little FortiGate. So we're going to go with split VDOM for this video. I'm going to go end. Be mindful of the message that comes up. Some settings, firewall policy object, security profile in the VDOM root will be deleted. A split task VDOM called FG traffic will be created, and you will be logged out for the operation to take effect. We'll go ahead and click yes. This is going to go ahead and kick us out. I'm going to log back in. And if you look in the top right as we get logged in, you will see the VDOM here. So the global VDOM, this is everything. So if we take a look at the interfaces and we see which interfaces belong where, everything belongs to the root VDOM, save for the tunnel interface for the FortiGate traffic. So now if I wanted to dedicate a separate port, let's say this port 4 to the, actually, excuse me, yes, to FG, no, if I wanted to dedicate a different port for my FortiGate traffic, because this is all my root. My root is my management VDOM. FortiGate traffic is where you'll see we have policies and objects, etc. So I don't have any interfaces in here. So to dedicate interfaces to this, I need to go into the global and choose the interfaces I want. And we can say, hey, I want you to go to FG traffic. And then I want 5 to go to FG traffic as well. Well, that's great. Now we have some interfaces we can work with in the FG traffic VDOM, which is my data plane again, and I can create a firewall policy with source destination of those interfaces. Now back to the point I was making earlier about configuration revisions. Because I'm not planning on doing the rest of the series in multi-VDOM mode, I'm going to go ahead and roll back to this pre-VDOM revision. And what's going to end up happening here is I'm going to click revert, and it's going to say reverting the system configuration will cause a device to reboot. Are you sure you want to continue? And I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to bring up my serial console here. We're going to watch this thing reboot. Okay, our login prompt is back. Let's go back to our browser. And this will eventually reload, however, I'm fairly certain that this will pop up now. It's not going to work. If you take a look, VDOMs are gone. If I do show full configuration system global, and we do grep, and I'm going to do -F so we can see everything. VDOM, as you can see, VDOM mode, no VDOM. So we've gone ahead and reverted back, and that's enabling VDOMs. In this next section, we're going to take a look at administrative accounts. We're going to take a look at my admin account, take a look underneath there for the trusted hosts, and then we're going to add an Active Directory server, create a group, and change my administrative account from a local account to a remote account. So going back to our FortiGate, let's go ahead and take a look at the admin account I'm signed in with. So we'll go to System, Administrators, and you'll see there's this Matt System Administrator, and he's a local user. So local user just means he is created here on the FortiGate, and it's managed by the FortiGate. This can be problematic. If you have 10 FortiGates, that means I need to create this Matt user on 10 different FortiGates. That also means when I need to change my password, that I need to update it 10 different times as well. The other area I'd like to direct your attention to is the two-factor authentication. By default, every FortiGate gets 2 trial tokens. These are fully featured tokens, as in they will give you a push functionality. They'll give you the one-time password. You can use it for sign-in. You can also use them for SSL VPN. The only thing you can't do is you can't transfer them from one FortiGate to another. These are tied specifically to this FortiGate, and that's the way it is. So back to going with 10 FortiGates, you would need 10 of these tokens, or you could use a central identity solution like FortiAuthenticator. One more thing is the trusted hosts. So currently I'm only allowing Matt to log in, this user basically, to log in from this subnet. Everything else will fail. So my goal now is to integrate this with AD. Why? If I create a new user and I give them admin capabilities, that's great. I may have to do this a couple of times, but where we run into trouble is if I need to update the password, or if I need to update something else with regards to that user, then I have to do it X number of times, X being the number of FortiGates I have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into user and authentication, LDAP servers, and I'm going to create a new server. For the name, I'm going to use ultraviolet local, and I'm going to use the IP address because I am not configured to talk to that DNS server that resolves this. Otherwise, you could use the domain name or the domain controller, FKDN, no problem. SAM account name. And the reason I do this is typically your CN is like your full name. So you would have to put first space last, and that is not exactly, while it's valid LDAP, it's not something that I like. I like folks using their username. The distinguished name, this is the base distinguished name that the FortiGate will search in. So it's the base directory, base OU, that the FortiGate will search Active Directory in or your LDAP server in. In which case, if you want the root of the domain, it would end up being DC equals, in my case, ultraviolet, comma, DC equals local. We will change the bind type from simple to regular. And I'm going to put the administrator. I'm going to put the administrator username there. The password is going to be my super secure password. And we're going to use start TLS. Can't connect to the LDAP server. And I have a pretty good idea why. We're using secure LDAP with a certificate coming from Active Directory that isn't trusted by the FortiGate. So we need to upload the CA certificate here. So we're going to click on create/import CA certificate. Since I already have the file, I'm going to click on file. If you know the SCEP information, you can use that as well. We're going to go ahead and pull that in. One thing I don't like is that the remote certificate is remote CA certificate, is almost always renamed or named CA cert. So we can go rename this real quick. Config VPN certificate CA, and we're going to go rename CA cert to ultraviolet.local, and that's it, and we can reload this and see that this is working now. It should be a trusted CA. So if we go back into user and authentication, LDAP servers, and we'll go to our server, as you can see, our credentials are invalid, and I think I know why right now. So administrator, test connectivity, we're good to go there. So we'll test our user credentials. Test, close, okay, good to go there. Alright, so now what we want to do, we want to create a user group that all the firewall admins, all users who are allowed to log into the firewall as an admin can authenticate against. So we're going to go to user groups, create new, it's going to be a remote group, and our remote server is ultraviolet.local. And we're going to go under ultraviolet networks, and we're going to go to our groups here. We're going to click add selected. FW admins is going to be here. So once we have our group, we can go into system administrators, and we'll create new. As you see, there's only 2 users here. We're going to create a new administrator, and we're going to call this match all users in a remote server group. We'll go AD FW admins. And the administrator profile we're going to assign is going to be super admin. The remote user group is going to be the group we just created. And we'll go ahead and create that. And if I log out, and I'm going to log in with a different user account, Sarah Tanner, a resident troublemaker. And as you can see, we're logged in, and I'm going to get prompted to watch what's new in FortiOS 7.0. Now I'll go back to my system administrators, and if I take a step further and delete Matt, then I could still authenticate against this. The only thing is I need some sort of local admin just in case I lose connectivity to LDAP. So I'm going to leave him as is, but as you can see, we're logged in as this group. And that about covers admin authentication. So to recap, the admin account is what allows you access to the FortiGate. Trusted host section actually says which networks you're allowed to log in from. Remote authentication is a central authentication scheme so that we don't have to create all of the authorized users everywhere we go. So we covered VDOMs in this video, and we covered the administrative accounts, and we set up an LDAP server. I'd like to thank you for your time. I definitely appreciate the time you've spent watching this. I know some of these videos can be long, so thank you very much for your time. I hope this helps. Madman out.